Welcome back to Blumira Briefings, your weekly download of the top headlines and trends for your security practice. This week, Clickfix finally made the jump to macOS. An identity protection company needed some identity protection, and a botnet apparently decided that 174 vulnerabilities just wasn't enough to keep it busy. First up, Clickfix, the social engineering attack that tricks users into copy-pasting malicious commands, has officially graduated from a Windows problem to an everybody problem. Attackers are now spoofing ChatGPT with fake error messages instructing macOS users to open their terminal and run commands that drop Atomic macOS or Luma Stealer directly. No vulnerability required, just trust and a pasted shortcut. The reason it works is the same reason that it's always worked. Telling somebody that there's an error that they need to fix is a lot easier than finding an O-Day. And it turns out that macOS users are just as susceptible to "please fix the error I made up" as everybody else. So Jake, how do defenders get ahead of an attack that's entirely user executed?
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. I've been keeping an eye on ClickFix for the last couple of years. Right around March 2024, we started to see a lot of attackers adopt it and use it in their own playbooks. And it's only been paying dividends for them. It's a very simple but effective attack. And now we're starting to see it evolve into targeting macOS systems and then also using things like ChatGPT and Claude Code as lures. So users searching for those things wind up on fake pages that basically trick them into thinking that they're installing something for ChatGPT or Claude Code, but they're actually installing some kind of malware or info stealer. I've been hearing that specific evolution be referred to as install fix. So if you're doing a little bit of your own research, you can use that keyword to kind of dig into that a little bit more. But in terms of the defense, it's all the same across all these different techniques. It's a very effective technique, but it's pretty standard in terms of how it works. And most of the time, it's that copy paste, tricking a user into thinking they're copying a legitimate command and then getting them to paste it into a terminal. So the very first recommendation I'm going to make is user awareness. This is a huge one for ClickFix because it absolutely requires user interaction. It requires that user trust to be exploited so that they're running commands, copying, pasting. It does not work without the user on the other end. There's no way that users can just throw ClickFix at a machine and it does it. The user needs to be in there. They need to copy and paste into the terminal. So the very first thing I'm going to recommend is making sure that users are aware this thing is happening. They're aware that it's evolved into this ChatGPT and Claude Code lure change. And that can also change in the future as well. So just kind of give people the awareness that things like this are happening. It happens on like fake CAPTCHA pages, fake updates, fake troubleshooting, all those kinds of things. So just making people aware of what's going on, and making sure people don't just think that because they have a Mac, they're no longer targeted or no longer susceptible to being infected. The next thing I want to mention in terms of defense is restricting terminal access for standard users. You could use an MDM profile to limit who can launch terminal.app or iTerm or any other terminal emulator. You can also block OSA script for non-admin users. So AppleScript is the primary in-memory execution vector for all these different versions of ClickFix. So keep an eye out for that. You want to also enforce Gatekeeper and Xprotect via MDM. You want to monitor and protect your launch agents. This is how a lot of ClickFix variations install their persistence modules. So you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on and alerting on new plist files in launch agents or launch daemons that reference binaries outside of the application's the default folder. In some cases, you might be able to block clipboard to terminal paste of multi-line commands. Some EDRs and MDM configurations can detect or warn on these things, and that would directly disrupt the core ClickFix interaction model. Next thing you want to look out for, and this is a little specific, is keeping an eye out for DNS queries to api.telegram.org. You might even have like some kind of DNS filter or something that can block those. The only reason that's so specific is because we're seeing api.telegram abused by attackers to exfil data after they get something like an info stealer dropped on a machine. So that might be a good thing that maybe you don't want to block right out the gate, but just see how often that happens in your environment, and then either make a detection or outright block it. And like I said, user awareness is the biggest part of this. So just make sure your users are aware of what's going on, and they'll help you the rest of the way. All right, back to you, Zoe.
Next, identity protection company Aura disclosed a breach exposing nearly 900,000 customer records. And these are people who signed up specifically to protect their personal information from that sort of thing. Security and identity vendors are attractive targets for exactly this reason. With one breach, you get a bulk haul. It's worth keeping in mind when you're evaluating which third parties are sitting on your client's most sensitive data. So, Mike, how should organizations be assessing the security posture of the vendors that they trust with this stuff?
Yeah, so this is one of those stories, Aura Security, right? They are essentially what they do is remove your information from data brokers. They do some other stuff like notify you of your name in breaches, some security around your personal identity, scamming, stuff like that. So this is an interesting one. It sounds like they had a breach from a uh, company that was acquired, and it was a legacy database, probably an old CRM, something along those lines, holding all their customers, about a million, little shy of a million customers. Sounds like the attackers got their personal data, no secrets, credit cards, PII, mostly just like probably name, email, stuff like that, maybe address, things that they would identify and collect of you to search for on the internet. Sounded like that kind of a thing. The interesting thing about this, single person got socially engineered, and then it sounds just like they abused their access to, get access to this database or CRM. They were in there for about an hour, and then they got evicted. But they were able to get all the records out in about an hour, which is interesting. The tough part here is, as a user, you're using a service like this for a reason, to get your name off the internet, to get your name out of data breaches, and the attackers are figuring out like, hey, if I can't buy the data from data brokers anymore, maybe we just go after the source of people that don't want their data on the internet. Typically these people that sign up for services like this sign up for a reason. They don't want to be exposed for certain reasons, and that's a pretty juicy target. So, to keep yourself safe from stuff like this, um, data removal services can be great. You really got to trust the service that you're using. And yeah, that's just how it's going to work, right? So try to pick a reputable one if you're going to do something along those lines, and also fully understand that you know that kind of thing isn't 100% effective. It just never will be, right? Your data will get out there, so it's more of a cleanup, internet cleanliness type thing. And maybe we see more attacks like this. Maybe we don't. It's hard to say, but you know, try to just be very wary of the services you're using, especially ones like this that are trying to protect your information.
Finally, RondoDox, an evolution of the Androx Ghost malware, is currently scanning for and exploiting 174 different vulnerabilities, running up to 15,000 exploitation attempts a day globally. It's targeting Laravel, Microsoft Exchange, Oracle WebLogic, TP Logic routers, and more. But what it's really after is your environment, your env files, the configuration files where AWS keys, cloud credentials, and API tokens tend to live quietly until somebody goes looking. Once it finds them, it either folds them into the infrastructure of the botnet or sells off admin access. For MSPs in particular, a stolen AWS key in one client environment can open up a lot more doors than just that one. So Ian, what should teams be prioritizing to lock down the configuration files that this botnet is hunting?
So what's interesting here about the RondoDox botnet is the approach has been shifting, but the process for the vulnerabilities is still roughly staying the same. Back when this discussed more in 2025, moving into 2026. 2025 saw a very large volume of exposed hosts that were being hit with thousands of different vulnerabilities every day. Whereas now moving into 2026, It seems that more specific high confidence vulnerabilities or CVEs are being leveraged. So the same hosts are still being hit. And this is in the space of IoT devices, something like a camera system that's exposed to the internet, or other systems too as well. So as before, where the attackers were using more of a quantity over quality approach, that's now shifted to where they're using the quality approach. And there's a couple specific CVEs that are being leveraged and used. These are more in the space of end day or 0-day vulnerabilities, where they're hoping to catch people off guard before things have been patched or before things have been approached from a proactive security standpoint, to then hit them and take control of those hosts or devices. There's a variety of tools that can be used to scan for these hosts all across the internet and show exactly what they're running. So a few things that you can do to try to proactively approach this. First and foremost, have a network map or have asset inventory of all your hosts throughout your network, whether it's camera systems, other IoT devices, servers, endpoints, laptops, workstations, whatever it may be. Make sure you have something that's up to date or that is updated throughout the year as you add or decommission their hosts. When you have that asset inventory or network map, proper patching needs to be put in place as well. Patching should be done on a fairly regular basis. Whether you have other change control windows or other system updates you do, patching of all systems should be done on a regular basis to avoid any of these vulnerabilities being used against your systems. On top of patching all those systems, if you do have IoT devices or things that have no need to have access to other parts of the network, those IoT devices and those systems should be segmented off to a separate network, which would stop any attacker from jumping those networks or traversing the network to try to have access to other systems. On top of all those things too as well, you can also subscribe and use threat feeds to help keep you in the loop with all of those IPs and domains that may be exhibiting this behavior. That way you can try to stop them too as well and alert your team if any of those IPs or domains have access to your systems.
So, quick recap. Clickfix is now a cross-platform problem. An identity protection vendor got reminded that consolidating sensitive data makes you a great-looking target. And a botnet is systematically working through 174 vulnerabilities with the energy of somebody who just discovered a new to-do list. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in the comments. I'll be back next week with more from a hotel room at RSA. And until then, stay safe out there, everybody. Bye-bye.